is David Barker, and I'm an Emeritus Professor in the Department of Geography and Geology at the University of the West Indies. Emeritus Professor means I'm retired, so I spent 37 years of my life in Jamaica. I was invited to prepare a paper as a keynote presenter on rural and agricultural issues, so that's basically what I did. I prepared a very general overview of agricultural and rural issues. It was a kind of a background paper really, because many of the other papers were more technical papers on different aspects of subnational jurisdiction. So I think it was an inclusion which was meant to sort of prepare a little bit of background, because many of the people in Hainan are interested in agriculture, so I think they wanted to get a perspective of what other people had been doing in agriculture in a tropical environment, which is what Jamaica's situation is. Well, the title of the paper was very general, and obviously I wanted to focus a little bit more specifically on the Caribbean experience, the Caribbean island experience, and the Jamaican experience particularly, because that's where I've done most of my research. And in fact, what I wanted to highlight in the paper was the kinds of research that I've been working on with my postgraduate students, most of them doctoral students, over the last 10 years. So what I tried to do in the paper was to talk about agricultural vulnerability, but it was pitched at two different scales. At the national scale, looking at agricultural vulnerability for the island, looking at the vulnerability of the agricultural sector, and then scaling that down to looking at in more detail at community level vulnerability, which is where my postgraduates and myself have been focusing on. Now the kind of framework for that was something we call in geography global change. And global change involves two broad sets of forces: economic globalization and climate change. And both of these broad sets of forces impact islands, impact the agricultural sector. And one of the ideas behind using a framework like that, which we call double exposure, after the idea that you could actually, in the old time photography, you could actually double expose a film if you press the shutter twice. If these sets of forces impact a country, an island, at the same time, the effects of them are amplified. So it's kind of an interesting perspective, because it means that the effects are magnified much worse than they would be if you were just talking about one particular aspect of economic globalization or one particular aspect of climate change. So that was the sort of framework. And then I looked a little bit into more detail about some of the climate change scenarios, because climate change now is one of the principal drivers of vulnerability in agriculture and in vulnerability in rural communities, poor rural communities in areas like the Caribbean islands. So I talked a little bit about how climate change is impacting islands and communities in the context of the Caribbean. Yeah, for me it was a really interesting experience, because the conferences that I normally go to are geography conferences. For the last 10 years I've just been going to geography conferences, but this was a conference with people from different disciplines, from economics and other disciplines who I don't normally interact with. And also I didn't know anybody, and that's also a nice experience to actually get to know people and find out what they're doing. Well, the very obvious outcome that was mentioned many times was this was the first international conference on island economies. So, like many other participants, I think I'm looking forward to the second and the third conference on island economies.